Welcome! Welcome!
Welcome.
Welcome!
Welcome to the Hangout. Hello. And welcome to the Hangout. This thing is itchy. My name's Joshua Martin, and today we're going to be talking about the 12 principles of animation because I had nothing planned this weekend. What I was going to talk about was baseball, the history of baseball. I'll come to that maybe one day because we're in spring training now. Baseball season's starting to get back into shape. And I had a good idea from one of the interns in the studio. They requested that I talk about tattoos. So I think that would be a cool little subject, so those two may come up sooner or later. But I had to rush into things, so I had to get something that I knew off the top of my head, you know. And since I'm an animation graduate, actually, so I wanted to talk about the 12 principles and how you use them to create an animation that looks realistic to the eye. Because when you watch an animation short, when you watch an animation film, and when you watch anything animation, you just want to believe what you see. You don't want to have to think about it and say, is that real? Is that actually how it's supposed to move? Or, you know, if you, like, we'll get into it. You'll see what happens because I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But we'll talk about the 12 principles and how they correlate to the story that you're trying to tell. I guess we can just start right away. So if you go to the two-shot Mayor and pull up the first image, the first one should be squash and stretch. So we'll talk about that first, if we can pull that up. So like I said, starting off, squash and stretch is the most important by far to use. I already got a two-shot up there. You don't have to use the virtual set. As you can see, there's two of me. Just go to cameras. It's actually like labeled two-shot at the top. So the first one that we're going to talk about is squash and stretch. And this is kind of the most important principle of all animations because it gives reality, it gives gravity, weight, mass, and flexibility to that specific object that you are quote-unquote animating. So we have one of the amazing rigs, one of the amazing practices, the hacky sack or the bag of sugar, whatever you want to call it, the practice of that, just using squash and stretch with this to accentuate the movement that it's creating. Another really good lesson or another good, I'm trying to think of the actual key word, but just another good practice to use is a bouncing ball effect. So if you have a bouncing ball that is very bouncy, like a rubber ball or something, if it hits the floor, it's going to spread out and then come back together as it bounces up. If you have a bowling ball, though, and it hits the floor, it's probably going to retain its shape to accentuate that it's very heavy, that the mass of it is very solid. So when it hits the ground, it's not going to bounce straight up. If it's a bowling ball, it's going to retain its shape, and it's going to bounce and barely come up maybe like half an inch off the floor. But it's just going to stay steady when it hits the ground. When using squash and stretch, it's important to keep the ejector's volume consistent. So when you stretch something, it needs to get thinner. As you can see, the hacky sack right there, as it's stretching up, it's actually getting thinner on its waist as well too. And when you squash something, it gets wider. I know you can't see it because my image is right there, but it's when it's completely flat on the floor, it's completely like stretched out, you know. It's just, it's a fun way of using this to, like I said, just show the illusion of gravity, weight, mass, and flexibility. If you want to learn more about this, there's plenty of videos, there's plenty of websites to learn more about this. What I'm on right now is Creative Block, Art and Design Inspiration, and the article name is Understanding Disney's 12 Principles of Animations. But understand that this isn't just Disney's 12 principles. This is, I don't even think it's a theory. I think it's the principles of animation to understand how to make a visually pleasing animation to the viewer. So if we go to the next one, these are actually all the 12 principles, as you can see on the screen right now. We'll go all of them, not in the order of this. I have a different order on my computer screen, but we'll get them in order to you on the screen as well too. But these are all the animation principles that we are going to be talking about today. But the next one that we're going to be talking about is anticipation. Anticipation is what you expect it to be. It's just waiting for that next movement, and it's how much you accentuate that anticipation. So for here we have this guy swinging or hitting a hammer on the ground, and the anticipation is him holding it straight up because he's not doing anything yet, but you don't know what's going to happen after he holds it up in the air. Maybe the hammer is too heavy and he falls backwards, or maybe he's winding it up so hard that he's going to crash the floor and break everything underneath him. And that is obviously called the action to the anticipation. The reaction is, we don't really got to talk about the reaction, but I believe the reaction is what happens afterwards of everything. So as you can see from left to right is how things happen in order, but the main thing we're talking about today is not today, but the main thing about this little image that you see is we're talking about anticipation. Let me quote from the web article that I'm using. Anticipation helps to prepare the viewer for what it's about to happen. It's the dance studio next door. There's nothing I can do about it.
Speak louder than I guess.
Speak louder?
You can hear the
I know, I'm trying, it's Elton John. I want to see the light beyond this yellow brick road. Okay, when anticipation is applied, it has the effect of making the object's action more realistic. So take a pitcher for baseball. The anticipation part is when he's in that windup and he's ready to release the ball. The batter, say he's standing still, but you don't want him standing still when that ball's coming at him, when he's ready to swing. When he's ready to swing, that's when the anticipation happens. That's when he lifts that front leg up, he raises the bat higher up, and he's ready to whack that ball out of the park. So there's a lot of key things that go into anticipation. Let me read from the article again. Consider how it might look if you were to jump in the air without bending your knees, or perhaps to throw a ball without first pulling your arm back, like I said with the pitcher idea. Jumping in the air, we're not going to just jump straight up with our knees, not bent or anything. We're not just going to fly up somehow randomly. You have to bend down to get the motion that you're about to spring high up in the air, and it depends on how high you want to go. If you want to touch the sky, maybe you have his butt all the way to the ground and his knees, like his calf touching his inner thigh, and that's how much his knees are bent, and he's ready to spring up high. It would appear very unnatural. It may not even be possible to jump without bending your knees, like I said. In the same way, animating movements without a flicker of anticipation will also make your motion seem awkward, stale, and lifeless. Like I said, all these principles go into an animation to make it believe that it's real. Because, like I said, when you watch something, you want to believe it. You don't want to think about it when watching an animation film or anything like that. You want to believe it, and that it's actually happening. Next thing that we're going to talk about is staging. So if we go to the next image, staging is in animation is a lot like composition and artwork. So if you have, I couldn't find a good image for this. I guess this works. Poor staging versus good staging, because you want to always show 3/4 of a character's face, because that really gets to show the whole emotion. If you just have the side angle, you don't really get to see much. You don't get to see much interaction between the facial expressions between the two characters. Let me go back to the article. What we mean by staging is you should use motion to guide the viewer's eyes and draw attentions to what's important within the scene. Keep the focus on what's important within the scene and keep the motion of everything else of non-importance to a minimum. Learn how to use camera work. Learn how to, if you have characters in the scene, where eyes follow to, our eyes follow to the other character's eyes. And then right after that, whoever's the main character in that shot, after we look at their eyes, we're looking at wherever. All right, now hang on to me real quick. You're looking at the main character in that specific scene or shot. That main character, you're going to look at that person's eyes first, and then right after that, you're going to follow the eyes of the main character and look wherever he or she is looking at, and then that's the second thing you're going to look at in a film most of the time. And another thing, let's go with staging. I talked about in my first episode, cinematography, is the rule of thirds. So you don't want things necessarily in the center. I know I'm in the center of my shot right now, but you kind of want things 2/3 of the shot in, either this way or this way, and what that does, it usually keeps things balanced. If we go back to, can we go back to my the beast shot real quick? Because I kind of have good balance right now, actually. So right now, I'm in the center, but I have good balance because I have a piece of artwork here and I have a piece of artwork here. And what's better is because these pieces of artworks, they balance each other out and they complement each other because they have the same style, they have the same colors, they have the same patterns, they have the same everything else. So Thank you. They keep me balanced right now. So that's the only reason why it works for me in the center right now. If you watch Wes Anderson in a lot of his movies, he likes to keep things centered, but he also has things balanced on the edges too. Now, say if I had two paintings here, I would want to be off the side a little bit because I'm a heavy attraction because we always want to look at a humanoid flowing object. We don't want to look at standard still pieces. We want to look at things that move. So if I'm off to the side and we have two heavy things over here, then I can counterbalance things off. That all goes into staging, as like I said. On to the next one, straight ahead and pose to pose. These are styles of animations. Straight ahead is when, say you take the drawing number 1 on the screen you see there. Instead of drawing I'm trying to find out where he has 2 feet again on the ground. So it's supposed to be, okay, 1, 13, and 25. You take those. We'll start with pose to pose. 1, 13, and 25. Those are your main keyframes in a walk cycle. Okay? Those keyframes you want to draw first, because you have both contacts on the floor. And this was pose to pose, again. Then you work on your in-betweens, which would be number 7 and number 19, because those are the high points as well too. And then you got 4, 10, 16, and 22. Those just, it works with the motion. Let me read the article, because it's hard to explain. There are 2 ways to handle drawing animation, straight ahead and pose to pose. Like I said, there are 2 styles of animation that you want to do. Each has its own benefits, and the 2 approaches are often combined. Straight ahead action involves drawing frame by frame from start to finish. So, straight ahead is if I had 1, I would draw number 4 after, and then 7, and then 10, and 13. I would work in the order from how you actually want to see it happen. If you're looking for fluid, realistic movements, straight ahead action is your best bet. I would not recommend using straight ahead for walk cycles or anything that has to involve human interaction to make it look realistic. I'll get in that in a little bit. With the pose to pose technique, you draw the beginning frame and the end frame and a few keyframes in between. Like I said, you start out with the contact of both feet on the ground, 1, 13, and 25 in the screen you see. Then you go back and complete the rest. This gives techniques, gives you more control with the scene, within the scene, and allows you to increase the dramatic effect of the motion. So if you're using straight ahead, I would recommend using it for liquid or for flames or anything that has an organic shape to it that necessarily doesn't have to stay steady. I would use pose to pose for anything like walk cycles or anything humanoid that has to retain this overall shape. Because with straight ahead and pose to pose, or with straight ahead animation, it's hard to retain the overall shape of that one specific object. Mostly things would start to get stretched or the perspective gets off a little bit. But with pose to pose, you kind of retain everything in a universal style. Going on to the next one, follow through and overlap. This is a very fun one to use. The ball with the tail is a good practice for this one because you get to see this time a lot in dog tails, cat tails, anything that has a secondary action to it. If you look at my hand right here, say it's the worm or something like that, you have this motion. We'll start with the hand. You have this motion coming down, and then as I go back up with my hand here, this part is still going down too, and it curls back up. And then as I hit the high point here, this hasn't hit the high point yet, it's coming down. Now I hit the high point and it's coming down now. So I'll read it from here just to give you a little more straight on definition. When the object comes into a standstill after being in motion, different parts of the object will stop at different rates, like I was talking about before. Similarly, not everything of an object will move at the same rate. This forms the essence of the fifth of Disney's principles. It's not Disney's principles again. If your character is running across the scene, their arms and legs may be moving at a different rate from their head. This overlapping action, likewise, when they stop running, their hair will continue to move or a few frames before coming to a rest. This is follow through. These are important principles to understand if you want your animation to flow realistically. So a quick example, a girl is running as fast as she can, and then somehow she's running on a cliff, and then she gets to the edge and she can't run anymore because, it's nothing there. So she stops real hard and her whole body stops, but her hair, something she can't really control, something that flows on its own, her whole body stops, but her hair will go a little forward, and if it was behind her head, now it's in front of her shoulders because that motion just kept following through. Going on to the next one, slow in and slow out. This one is also another one that's kind of tricky to explain. You can see the ball movement right here. So when things get to the highest point, they kind of slow down with one another. And when it gets in the middle, that's the fastest point, and the patterns or the drawings are more spread out. Best way to understand slow in and slow out is to think about how a car starts and stops. It will start moving slowly. Say you're at a red light and it just turned green. It starts moving slowly before gaining momentum and speeding up. The reverse will happen when the car brakes. In animation, this effect is achieved by adding more frames at the beginning and end of an action sequence. Apply this principle to give your objects more life. So you're going to have more keyframes in the beginning. So we'll talk about the car technique. It just turned green. You're going to have a lot of keyframes because the car is starting to speed up. It's still slow. You get to see everything in motion. And then you're on the highway now, and it's 60 miles an hour, and that car just zooms by. So it's probably only going to be like 2 frames of that motion between each other. And then it slows down again, and you're starting to see every little bit of keyframe again. All right, I'm going to take a quick commercial break. I need a little drink. We'll just play one commercial, and then I'll be right back to give you the last 6 remaining.
Being a successful woman in business means having the courage to own who you are. We understand the challenges faced by women, and we are here to help. Our team is here to develop the best strategy designed just for you. Your path is unique, and with the right tools, you can accomplish your dream. From radio to TV, from podcasting to magazines, we create the visibility to amplify your impact in business. At New Dawn Media, we are here to help bring your message forward and help your business flourish. It is time for your message to be seen and your voice to be heard. Contact us at 866-224-5422 or brooklyncafe.tv. Your voice can make a difference.
Single frame. There's stop
Now
motion
we're back to the
animation where you
Hangout
can use
with
the
your host,
cameras.
Joshua
There's
Bond.
claymation. Oh! What happened there? Hello, welcome back to the 12 Principles of Animation. Oh, wait, no. Welcome back to the Hangout with Joshua Martin. Today we're talking about the 12 Principles of Animation. I covered the first 6, which I talked about: squash, stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead, and pose to pose, which is the animation style, follow through an overlap, and slow in and slow out. Now we're on to arcs. And arcs is everything in drawing has to have a beautiful curve to it. Everything has to be nice and flowy. So if we have a walk cycle right here, we look at the feet. When feet walk, they plant their foot and then they hold it there as the other one is raising up and walking to the next part. You don't drag your foot on the ground. It has a nice, beautiful curve to it. Even when you're walking with your hands, they have a nice little curve to it. You don't walk like this, like where it's straight back and forth. It starts from the top, goes down, and then goes back to the top again. And it has this nice, beautiful arc to it. So everything in drawing has a nice little curve as well too. When working in animation, it's best to stick with the laws of physics. Most objects follow an arc or a path when they're moving, and your animation should reflect that arc. For example, when you toss a ball into air, it follows a natural arc as the effect of the Earth's gravity act upon it. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go on to the next one right now. Secondary action. I don't think this is a good image as well too. Secondary action. Let me read what it says here before going on to that image. Secondary actions are used to support or emphasize the main action going on within a scene. Adding secondary actions help add more dimension to your character and objects. For instance, the subtle movement of your character's hair as they walk, or perhaps a facial expression or a secondary object reacting to the first. Whatever the case may be, the secondary action should not distract from the primary one. So I guess if you can take it this image right here, you can say, "I'm angry at you," and put your hands on your hips, and it shows the basic emotion of anger, you know. But if we want to show real anger at someone, like this image right here, you're chopping up an onion, and it's scary when someone's holding a weapon as a knife, even though they're not using it as a weapon. They chop it down real hard, and then they say they're angry at you. You're way more threatened by that action, you know. So look at secondary actions. It's very useful. We'll do a little more research on that one as well too. But if we go to the next one, we got timing, and this one is very key in animation. I mean, this is a very big one in the laws of animation. So this is actually a pretty good, because we were talking about the slow in and slow out, kinda. If you have an old person walking, they're walking on a crane, they're gonna probably walk more slowly, so you're gonna use more keyframes, more drawings on them as they walk slower, obviously. For this principles of animation, we need to look to the laws of physics again and apply what we see in the natural world to our animations. In this case, the focus is on timing. If you move an object more quickly or slowly than it would naturally move in the real world, the effect won't be believable. Using the correct timing allows you to control the mood and the reaction of your characters and objects That's not to say you can't push things a little, especially if you're creating an imaginary world, but if you do, be consistent. Be consistent. You always want everything. If going back to the old man, if he drank this special potion, it made him young again. You want him to move around like a 24-year-old, and the next day you still want him to move around like a 24-year-old. There's a lot to go into something besides just this one key. You got to think about basically everything as one whole aspect. The next one, a very fun one to talk about, exaggeration. Too much, the first line right here, too much realism can ruin an animation. I'm trying to think of specific movies. I mean, the only one I can think of off the top of my head is Polar Express, where it had that realistic style to it. I mean, there was a lot of flowy things, the snow in there. It gave it some aspect, but exaggeration is what we see kind of in Looney Tunes shows. We can see the difference here, obviously, difference between a ball hitting the ground versus some exaggeration to it. It stretches out. There's dust that flies off when it hits the ground or something like that. You see the guy punching and the golfer swinging right here. A pitcher, if he's winding up, maybe his body twists and twists and twists and twists and twists and twists, and then he unravels and he throws this 150-mile-an-hour fastball right down the center, and it breaks the catcher's glove or goes right through it or something like that. Or maybe exaggeration. You have this cute little, because I'm looking at this thing right here, you have this cute little creature that you don't know what it looks like, and this bug bounces around its head, and then this cute little thing opens his mouth, and his mouth is ginormous, and it looks like something new. I'm so bad at explaining things. This is why I'm here. I'm trying to get better at this, but it's just, you want to exaggerate what happens, making it appear static, or instead add some exaggeration to your characters and objects to make them more dynamic. Find ways to push the limits just beyond what's possible, and your animation will pop. It will make it look exciting to the viewer's eyes. The next one is not. It is used in 3D animation, but it's more for 2D animation because it's talking about perspective and making sure everything looks anatomically correct. If we go to the next image, we're talking about solid drawing. You got to understand. You need to understand the basics of drawing. Obviously, this includes knowing how to draw in three-dimensional space, like I said, perspective, and understanding form and anatomy, weight and volume, light and shadows. While you can push the limits here, too, it's important to remain consistent. Again, that word consistent. If your world has wonky doors and a warped perspective, keep that perspective throughout the entire animation. Otherwise, things will fall apart. So one good key is you always want to have a line of action when drawing something. You don't want things to look static. You want things to look like it's in motion. But like I said, perspective, simple anatomy. If you have a bowling ball, you don't want it to be holding by this tiny little thread in a restaurant if it has like decor around or something like that. You want things to, like I said, you want people to believe what you see. No, you want people to believe what you draw. You don't want them to have to sit there and question every single little thing that they see on screen. And last but not least, we have appeal. This is also goes hand to hand with solid drawing. Your characters, objects, and the world in which they live need to appeal to the viewer. This includes having an easy-to-read design, solid drawing, and personality. There is no formula for getting this right, but it starts with strong character development and being able to tell your story through the art of animation. Pixar has a certain style as we know it. Let me try to think of something else. If you remember the show called, I think it's called 16, they had a very vector, it was called Flash animation. They all had this specific style of of character design. You know, they all have the thin arms, very lanky kind of body. If you look here, they all have shapes as bodies, and then also with appeal, if you have we'll talk about mid-century swordsman. You don't want him just walking through New York City in modern day times. It'll be throwing the viewer off a little bit, you know. So I hope this helped out a little bit. These are the 12 principles of animation. They go into every single drawing, every single movement that you apply to. You got to think of all these little steps and how they can help you bring your animation to life, bring it to a more realistic viewership. You want people to believe what you are drawing and what you imagine in your head, because you can create anything you want with animation. Literally anything you want. That's the fun thing about it. So it's my time to wrap things up. My name is Joshua Martin. Welcome to the Hangout, and catch me next week, Monday 11 a.m. on Facebook. I don't know what the heck we're going to talk about. I'll get it to you this weekend, hopefully, and not 30 minutes beforehand. But you know what? Peace out.
Thank you for watching The Hangout. If you want to be on the show, just contact me at 888-994-4995 Studio A. Thank you.